Good morning. You may have noticed that it's just me and Cameron today. Today is Natalie's birthday, and so she wanted to spend it on some tropical island, relaxing with her feet, toes dipped in the ocean water. And so I granted that to her. I said, go, have fun, enjoy your birthday. But the reality is she's homesick with 2 kids. So that's more typical of our birthdays in our family, but they're fine. They're okay. They have this sinus garbage that's going around, and we just didn't want to spread the love with people, so we kept them home. Our theme this year is the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Proverbs 16:9. And of course, we're talking about a process of loving neighbors, getting into people's homes, getting them into our home, loving God, getting them to worship and fall in love with God, and then moving people to serving others. Paul says that we were created for good works in Ephesians chapter 2. You don't have to raise your hands for this, but how many of us, through really troublesome times, find ourselves, speaking of islands, on a very lonely island, kind of by ourselves, in a lonely place, just struggling our tails off, if we had tails? How many of us would be there? I mean, again, you don't have to raise your hands, but I find myself in this lonely place every so often where I just feel like there have been so many losses in life, you kind of have to step back and reevaluate and say, we talked about this in class this morning, I can't afford to lose one more thing or one more person in my life, and so I just need to pause and reevaluate. There's this field behind my mom's house. You go back through the woods, and it's kind of like we call it the enchanted forest. There's a section of the woods where you're going through like all these ferns, and then there's another section, and it's almost like this clear break. And then there's another section you're going through these old hemlocks, and then another section you're on this ridge, and it's just this really cool landscape. And then finally you break out of the woods, and this lonely tree field is kind of staring at you, and it's hard to tell in the picture, but off to the side is Walker Hill, out on 160. You have the beautiful mountains, and of course, just over that hill, with the rolling hills, is the overlook where the Ship Hotel used to be. So you can see all of this beautiful scenery, and there's this lonely tree right in the middle of this field. And I remember going to this lonely tree field when I was a kid, and the tree still looks exactly the same. Everything from my memory looks identical. Nothing has changed. And this picture actually was taken just this last summer in 2021. We had family members up, and we went for a walk, and of course, this is a generational thing, so we're like, all right, we got to teach the little ones about the lonely tree field, because we have a lot of memories there. What's interesting about this is I think this kind of is a metaphor for my life when I talk about this loneliness and finding these times in life where you feel so alone. And probably all of us experience that at different times in our life when we experience loss. But what's kind of interesting about this is, first of all, how trees get in the middle of fields. Does anybody know the real story? Raise your hand if you know the story of how they get here. This is the biggest mystery, and if you ever want to find people so divided on the internet about a subject, look up how lonely trees get in the middle of fields. There are all kinds of tales about this. Even farmers don't really have a clear answer on this. But from the best of my research, what I found out is that there's a whole bunch of reasons for how the trees might have gotten there. Anything from like there was an immovable rock in the middle of the field, and they didn't want to get their plows, tangled up in this rock, so they planted a tree to mark that rock. Other people say that, birds ate seeds somewhere, then they dropped the seeds, and then, this tree springs up, and so the farmers start plowing around it, and they let it grow up. Other people say that they planted them back in the day as shade trees. And I've used these trees when I worked on a farm growing up. I've used these trees as shade trees. When you need a place to eat lunch, it's great. You just pull the tractor right up to the tree and you eat lunch underneath the tree. It's a great shade tree. And so some people say that they intentionally planted them to give their horses shade and to be able to eat lunch under the tree. I don't know the genesis of where these lonely trees came from, but they're all over the place. We have them all over here in Somerset County and all across the country. It's a well-known phenomenon. But what's interesting is you think about this lonely tree, but as you get closer, that tree gets bigger and more magnificent. And from far away, you can't really tell what kind of a tree it is, but you get closer, and you can tell this is an oak tree. And then you get closer yet, and you see that there are other trees and shrubs growing underneath it. It's this massive oak. This tree is probably, I'd say, 250 plus years old. Just by looking at it, that would be my guess. I'm no expert, but it's an old tree. And I remember camping under this tree one night whenever I was probably a teenager, thinking, like, this is a really lonely place. Out in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be quiet. It's going to be peaceful. You're looking at the stars. There's no light pollution here. It's so incredible. And we slept right underneath this tree, myself and some of my brothers. And about half an hour after we fell asleep, the stupid owl, this annoying owl who was in the tree, came to life. And it was so obnoxious and so loud, and it sounded like a pterodactyl had gotten caught up in the tree, and a T-Rex was attacking it or something. It was the most strange, loud, annoying noise. And I kind of thought about this a little bit. You know, even in our loneliest times, there's still people around us. There's still activity. There's still life. But Paul talks about losing everything. And I don't know what you guys are attached to. I don't know what in life would be detrimental for you to lose. I know for me, relationships is definitely at the top of the list. I fear losing relationships. I don't want to lose friendships. I don't want to lose good relationships. Losing loved ones. We've experienced a lot of loss in this congregation over the past couple of years. We've experienced loss in my family. Loss is so difficult. Our house, believe it or not, I know it sounds vain, but, right, Cameron, we're attached to our house. We never want to see our kids talk about it. We don't want to lose our house ever. We have so many good memories there. We love the school district. We love friends and family. We never want to lose our house. But sometimes losses come. I'm going to back up a little bit from where Jacob read this morning. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 3, starting in verse 2. Paul says, look out for the dogs. Look out for the evildoers. Look out for those who mutilate the flesh. For we are the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. Though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh also, if anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. Paul's talking about these people who come in and they force people who are not Jewish people, they force them to be circumcised. And they say, you will not go to heaven unless you experience this, unless you're circumcised. And they were mad dogs about it. They were creating all this division. And so Paul's addressing this, and he says, look, you got to watch out for these people. You got to watch out for people who divide. You got to watch out for people who hunt for for people to devour them. And Paul says, if we want to appeal to the flesh, I myself have reason to boast. I was a persecutor of the church. I was righteous under the law. Paul followed scriptures to the T. But then he goes on, starting in verse 7. Paul says, but whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish. I wrote the blog article for this week about the sermon, and the title of my article is It's All Crap. The word that Paul uses here is skubalon. It's a harsh word. Charles, I know it's my favorite word in the Greek language. It's probably yours too. Crap is actually a softening of what this word meant. It was a slang term, much like our SH word. And Paul's intentionally using strong language to say, I consider everything that I lost total feces, total crap. It's all crap. In fact, if you open up the Greek English lexicon, that's the definition for this word. It's all crap. And so Paul's saying, I consider everything that I've lost and everything I've suffered for the sake of Christ, I've considered that it's all crap. It doesn't matter. And Paul's referring to back when he was a strong Jew, back when he studied the scriptures and knew the scriptures inside and out. Paul's talking about possessions. Paul's talking about his reputation, because that certainly went down the drain when he became a Christian. Paul's talking about all these things that do not matter. And I think Paul definitely found himself in this lonely place. He's in the middle of a field. He's this lonely tree just kind of out there. And then he's got to figure life out. I mean, immediately when Paul becomes a Christian, he's being lowered off the side of a wall in a basket to avoid death. Paul lost so much for the sake of Christ. Over and over and over and over again, the scriptures tell us, Jesus himself tells us, that you will lose everything for my name. In fact, Jesus says, if anybody wants to be a disciple of mine, you've got to deny yourself. What does that mean? That means to give up everything about yourself. Deny yourself, pick up your cross daily, which means be willing to suffer every single day to the point of death, and follow me. Jesus says anybody who can't do these three things is not a disciple of mine. That's a lonely place to be. But here's what Paul says about it. I consider all of this lost. I consider it as rubbish or crap in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. Did you hear that? By any means possible, I want to attain the resurrection. I want to get to heaven. We've been talking about this in our class, and this morning especially, we talked about this in the adult class, that we lose so much when we experience trauma, that the losses are unimaginable, and that it's so hard to find your way back to this path of hope because, sadly, other people often tear us down or trip us up or tell us what we're doing wrong or what we need to believe or how much more faith we need to have or how we need to just let things go or how we need to rid ourselves of bitterness or how God needed another rose, and they just throw all this stuff at us that just, it hurts. And I think the best thing that we can do for other people is acknowledge their losses and acknowledge their pain and acknowledge their suffering. And Paul takes it a step further and he says, all of this stuff that I lost, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm clawing my way to Christ. Paul says, I'm willing to lose everything. Do you understand the magnitude of that? I don't. I mean, admittedly, this scares the life out of me. To get to a point of submission to God where you say, I am willing to lose everything. I consider all of the losses in my life complete crap compared to gaining Christ. That scares me. I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to lose relationships. I don't want to lose people. I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to lose things, but it's a possibility. And Paul says we've got to be willing to lose all these things, to put Christ on, and to attain the resurrection from the dead. I wonder what would happen if we took this so seriously, if we took the relationships that we do still have in our life, if we took them so seriously to look at people like this is a soul who's in front of me. It's not just a person. I'm not just having an argument with a person. This is a soul. And this soul one day will depart from their body, and it's either going to go to heaven or it's going to go to hell. Do we realize the seriousness of that? I think Paul did. But I think oftentimes we really struggle with understanding the weight and the seriousness of that. And so we delay, we put things off. We panic over any loss that we experience, financial losses, any loss, name it. I think we hit panic mode almost immediately. And Paul's helping us refocus and put these things into perspective. And he says, look, I'm willing to suffer these losses for the sake of Christ. And I think when we do that, other people look up to us. They don't shake their heads at us, they look up to us. People who are genuinely sincere. And they start to see God more clearly. And they start to see that there's hope for them. If this person can make it, I can make it. If this person can still put their faith in God and put their trust in God, I can put my faith in God. And so Paul leads by example, and he shows us how important it is to follow Christ. We're coming up pretty soon on Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. And I love that one of my former professors, John Mark Hicks, talks about before Sunday there was Friday. Before there was the resurrection that we celebrate, there was the death and the loss and the sorrow and the betrayal. And we have to go through those sufferings to attain to the resurrection. Let's remember that and treat people with care and honor and respect this coming week. Bless people. And I really mean that. Go bless people and show them what it looks like to be a Christian. If there's anybody this morning who's not yet taken that step to put Christ on in baptism, or if you have prayer needs, we'd invite you to come up as we all stand and sing this song together.